Alrighty, you're probably all sick of listening to me talk, so let's get our presenter up here. Kevin Morris, he's been with the Federal Aviation Administration for 10 years. During that time, he's worked with both large and small aircraft operators, served as an aircraft accident investigator, and been a UAS specialist for the past 4 years. He's a vocal supporter of UAS operations and their integration into the National Airspace System. And he also happens to be a program manager with the FAA Safety Team. He's been working with us here at the Safety Center. In fact, if you've been to previous presentations, you've probably seen him. So let's get him up here. Kevin Morris, come on up.
Let's see, is my mic unmuted? Probably not. Test? Am I good? Can you guys hear me? All right, I talked about it anyway.
And you're obviously a friend of the FAASTeam because, well, hey, you're part of the FAASTeam. So you have a certificate of appreciation for helping us out this morning.
Ooh.
And
nice.
And the stage is yours.
All right, thanks, Jason. All right. Thank you guys for coming out. Have anybody seen my presentation before? Great. So then I don't feel like I'm repeating some of the same things. What obviously I want to go over today is ADM, which is Aeronautical Decision Making, and also risk management. Most remote pilots who are flying small UAS, or most hobbyists, these might be new terms to you. So I want to go over this. But a few things first. First, I want to tell you why I'm doing this anyway. Why is this stuff important? And then I want to kill some myths with some facts, because I hear a lot of them, people calling in, talking to individuals such as yourself, and then go over a little bit of terminology, because we have a tendency in the UAS world to really interchange a lot of words. Waivers, exemption, and authorization, they all get jumbled up, but they're all very, very different things. So I'll help you out that way. And then I want to get into ADM, risk management. And at the very end, I have 4, because I just added one last night, which was a good one I saw happen, 4 real-world scenarios. I'm going to let you guys tell me what you would do, and we'll walk through those together. So why is this stuff important? Obvious reasons, safety. But how about this stuff? How many people have been following news, right? UAS stuff shows up in the news all the time. Investigations launched. Suspected drone strikes passenger jet in London. Anybody remember that? Did it turn out to be a drone hitting the airplane? No, did not, right? DJI Phantom 3 hit a Quebec woman in the head. This one actually was a drone hitting a woman in the head. But the point being is that the news media is just waiting for you guys to make a mistake. They can't wait to run with the news story of drone hits aircraft, drone hits car, drone crashes into a schoolyard full of children. Or this one here, Sedona Airport warns drone pilots to stay away because there was an alleged collision with a private airplane. That sounds pretty ominous. If you actually clicked on that and read the article, you'd find this statement in there. The FAA investigated the incident and says multiple FAA inspectors examined the evidence and found no indication of an in-flight collision with any object. So of course they went back and they changed the headline right away. Or no, they didn't. Of course they didn't. Because buildings that don't burn, they don't get clicks. That headline stayed. So even though you read this and you're like, man, a drone hit an airplane, it didn't. And when you read the article, it said it didn't. But they never changed the headline. So why is this stuff important? Safety. You guys are operating aircraft in the National Airspace System. You're part of the manned pilot world, the unmanned pilot world. We're coming together in the NAS. We want everyone to be safe. How about future regulations? I promise you, if we start running UAS into airplanes or cars or buildings, and it gets picked up by Fox or CNN or MSNBC, whatever the big news outlets that are just waiting to report, Congress gets excited. And when Congress gets excited, they start making more rules, more laws. And how many times does Congress make a law that you get excited about, right? So we have future regulations to worry about. And then public perception. The public perception on UAS is twofold. If you mention drone, 2 things come to their mind. You're blowing somebody up with a bomb, or you're spying on their teenage daughter sunbathing in their backyard. Those are the 2 mental images people get when it comes to drone. If we don't operate safely, we will enhance that bad perception. It's driven by the media. And like I said, I can't tell you guys enough, and you probably know, they are just waiting to report. They can't wait for you guys to screw up. So let me kill some myths here right away. Here's the first one. I'm not getting paid. Nobody's giving me cash money or a check to fly my UAS. Therefore, I'm not a commercial operator. I'm not getting paid. The fact is, you could be. We consider commercial operations for UAS to be operating in furtherance of business, whether or not money is exchanged. So I have a list up there which shows some different, realtors, nonprofits, media production. But I'd like to give an example. So let's say you're a farmer and you own a large farm, acreage, you're growing a crop, let's call it soybeans. You buy a drone, you buy a UAS because you think they're neato. And you take it up and you fly it around, you take videos of your farm, you take photos of your farm, you email them to friends, you post it on your Facebook, you got a YouTube channel, you got a video up there, look at how cool my farm is, this is really neat, I got a neat little drone. In reality, you're probably a hobbyist, recreational use. You take the same farmer, the same UAS, the same land, he goes up to film because I want to know where I have an infestation problem in my crops, in my soybeans. I want to know if I have any dry areas or damaged crop areas from that last storm in my soybean field. Same farmer, same field, same UAS, but the intent of the mission changed. It went from this is fun and neato to I'm using this in furtherance of my business of farming. Nobody's paying me to do that, right? I'm not paying myself to fly my UAS on my farm, but I am now using it in a commercial manner. So it's not the device, it's not the person, it's not what you're taking pictures of, it's what you're using the UAS to do. That determines whether you're commercial or not, whether or not money is exchanged. Here's another one. The FAA, we don't control airspace below 400 feet or 83, 73. So I've heard different altitudes. We are responsible for all airspace from the ground up. So there's a common misconception out there dating back to this 1946 Supreme Court ruling, Cosby versus, not C-O-S, but C-A-U-S-B-Y, different Cosby, versus the U.S. Supreme Court where he sued for jets low flying over. That was not an airspace concern. That was a taking of land concern. That's what he sued on. That's what he won. It was a taking of land. And if you guys have questions on that, when we get to the end of my presentation, I'll be more than happy to go into some more depth on that. But navigable airspace, which we are in charge of, goes down to the surface. So you don't own the airspace above your property. Here's another one. The FAA, there's illegal operators out there all the time, and you guys don't do anything with them. You never do anything to them. Yes, we do. But it may not be what you want to have happen. Most, let's say, Part 107 operators who are flying have lost business to somebody who's not doing it legally. Would that be a fair statement? Yeah, a lot of heads nodding. Airspace, right? I can't get in that Class Delta airspace because I got to submit an authorization and the FAA's portal is broken and it takes forever and it's going to take me 90 days to get my authorization. I'm sorry, I'm a good pilot. I have to turn down the job. And the guy is, okay, can you do it? And he's like, heck yeah, I'll do it. And away he goes. And there goes your money. All right? We know that that's happening out there. And every time we're made aware of it, I promise you, every Flight Standards District Office follows up on any complaint or formal complaint of alleged illegal activity. We do. But it may not be what you want. Most guys wants to come out, kick the door in, confiscate the UAS, throw them in jail, and fine them $2 million. Well, that might be nice. It would deter a lot of people, but we don't have that kind of authority. And with our compliance philosophy, our first reaction to somebody doing something against regulation is educate. That's our first step. And while many of you may not like that answer for the illegal guy, if you happen to run afoul of a reg unintentionally, let's say, you may appreciate that compliance philosophy because we're not going to come with the hammer. We're going to come with educational tools for you to use. Now, if that particular individual is identified as operating illegally and we try to educate them, you can't do it, you can't do it, and now they do it again, well, I guess education doesn't work and now we can go through enforcement. But it takes time. So yes, we absolutely do things with illegal UAS operators. It just may not be at the speed and level that you'd like to see. Here's another one. This is one of my favorites, right? How many people have heard this? You got a remote pilot certificate? You're not a real pilot. I'm a private pilot. I fly a real airplane. I know all sorts of stuff. I will stand here in my little FAA shirt and I will tell you, yes, you are. I can't emphasize that enough. If you hold a remote pilot certificate, the FAA has certificated you as an airman under Part 107. You're not an airman under Part 61, but you're still an airman. And if you're still an airman, you're still a pilot. Aviation is a little bit ego-driven, right? So I can say, I'm a private pilot. I'm a real pilot. You guys are remote pilots. You're not real pilots. And there'll be a guy standing over and says, I'm a commercial pilot. Private pilot guy, you're not a real pilot. And then there's a guy standing behind him and says, I hold an ATP. I fly a 747. I don't know what you fly around commercially, but I am a real pilot. I fly 747s all over the world. And there'll be a guy behind him that's like, I got 2 shuttle landings. What do you got? Right? So we always try to one up. But the fact is, and remember this, you are pilots. We look at you as pilots. We're going to treat you like pilots. We expect you to act like pilots. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. So let's do a little terminology. Exemption. Prior to Part 107 coming online, this was our way for you to operate commercially. How many people held or applied for Exemption 333, right? That was our interim between no rule at all and Part 107. So when people talk about getting an exemption, you're talking about a request made to operate outside of the rules. It's a big deal. Exemptions are a big deal. They're generally approved by headquarters folks. They're not done in the field. And the 333 exemptions are a perfect example if you want to take a look at them. The exemption itself gives you permission to operate. It will also give you, what were there, 17, 18 conditions and limitations on that exemption. So that's your set of rules to operate under. Waiver. A waiver is a request by an operator to not comply with a specific rule. Right? It's a temporary condition. There's usually an expiration date on it. UAS waivers are reviewed by headquarters. A lot of manned aircraft waivers are done by the district offices in the field. But generally speaking, they're issued by Flight Standards, where I work. Flight Standards issues waivers for operations. Sometimes we have to coordinate with ATC. A waiver is not a guaranteed thing. How many people have applied for waivers? I want to operate at night, or I want to operate over people on a Part 107. A lot of people think, well, the FAA says they'll waive operating at night, therefore I'm just going to submit online. And honestly, this is how some of the waiver submissions look. When we ask you to describe how you're going to mitigate the risk, they say, I'm going to fly safe, period. One sentence, like 4 words, and in it goes, right? Because they think, well, the FAA says they're going to give it, I just need to submit and get it. No, that's not how it works. You have to give a lot of risk analysis and risk mitigation, by the way, of what we're going to be talking about in this presentation. And the last one is authorization. Authorization is not a waiver. Authorization is permission to operate in a particular airspace. Under 107, that's Class Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or Echo surface areas, right? Authorizations are issued by air traffic control. So this word authorization and waiver gets mixed up all the time. I have people call me up and say, I'm trying to get an airspace waiver into this airspace. I'm like, do you want a waiver or authorization? There's silence. I'm like, do you just need to get permission to get in? Yeah, I want a waiver. Well, no, you're not asking for a waiver. You're asking for an authorization. So it helps to know these definitions if you understand particularly the difference between authorization, which is permission to operate according to rule, and a waiver, which is permission to operate outside of the way the rule is written. 2 very different terms. Some keys. You want to submit your application, particularly with waivers, as soon as possible. We say at least 90 days. And I know for most UAS operations that doesn't work very well. But we have to have time to review it because we get a lot of waivers. And so we don't want you to submit it today for tomorrow. You can submit a waiver ahead of time. For instance, we probably issue, the most waivers we issue are for operating at night, which waives the daylight only rule. If you think you might need to operate at night, go ahead and submit the waiver, because if it gets approved, I believe it's a 2-year authorization for that, 2-year waiver window for you to operate. It's not just 1 day. You'll get it for a couple years. You must use the web portal. Okay? You must use the web portal. That's the same for authorizations as it is for waivers. You have to use the web portal. Now, some people say, well, the rule, Mr. FAA guy, doesn't say anything about using the waiver. For example, I want an authorization to operate in Class Bravo airspace. The rule just says I need ATC authorization to operate. It doesn't say I have to use your portal. Fair enough. It doesn't. So could you call the tower on the telephone and ask for permission? You sure could. they should tell you, based on air traffic guidance, go use the portal. That's what they should be telling you. And I won't stand up here and tell you that every single one of them does that, because not everyone does. Some people have called the tower and gotten authorization. A couple things about that. One, in terms of our regulation, that's not a violation. You got authorization to operate in that airspace. That's what the rule requires. We prefer you and recommend you to use our portal. Air traffic should be telling you to use our portal, but there's nothing in the rule that states you have to. The problem is people are getting authorizations verbally, and then they go fly. And most often everything works fine, right? Not a problem. But there's going to be some time where you have a flyaway. The UAS goes into another aircraft that's attempting to land, or does something you don't want to do. And somebody like me is going to come up and investigate, and they're going to ask you, where's your authorization? Well, the guy in the tower told me I could do it. Well, okay, you're supposed to use it. Did you get it in writing? No, he just told me on the phone I could do it. Aviation, everything is in writing. So if you're going to issue our preference of using the portal, make sure you get whatever you're doing in writing. That's a little CYA information for you. If you're getting a verbal authorization from the tower, they shouldn't be giving it to you anyway, but if it happens to work out for you, make sure you get it in writing. Now, the process for authorizations right now to get into airspace, nobody likes, right? Would we all in agreement? Right? Okay. Are you guys familiar with LANCE, the Low Altitude Authorization Notification capability? This is coming online this fall. Not every airport's going to be available, but there's going to be quite a few. What this is going to allow you to do is stand where you want to fly, pull out your phone, hit the location, your radius, your maximum altitude, send. It's going to go and it's going to ping the server. Everybody heard of grid maps? We started to release grid maps, right? It shows you your max altitudes around certain airports, and we grid them off. It's going to go to the server and compare it to that. You can see the grid map, so it's not guesswork. So if you're standing in the area and it's like 50 feet is your max altitude, you might not want to request 51 feet. But you request it. If it reaches the server and it matches up with the grid map, you're going to get an authorization back to your mobile device cleared with a number and permission for a time. You're cleared at this airspace. Here's your authorization number for the next 20 minutes, and you go. And it's supposed to happen that fast. None of this 90-day stuff. This isn't a pipe dream. This is what we always wanted the authorization process to be. It's happening this fall. In Murphy's Law, it won't be at your airport, but eventually it's going to include all the airports in the United States, class Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo to the surface. So that is coming. We've made the announcement. I'm not giving you any covert material here. You can look it up online. All right, so let's get into some ADM. The easiest way to describe aeronautical decision making is a lot like common sense. It's kind of like, it makes sense, that's why I do it. If you have good ADM skills, people probably say, that guy's got a lot of common sense when he flies. The problem can be is sometimes our common sense is gained through our experiences, which we have because we didn't have any bleeping common sense to begin with, right? We don't want to learn by experience. Experience is the worst teacher. Experience gives us the test first and then shows us the lesson after that. We want to develop good ADM skills. So let me ask you, what's your thought? Can good judgment be taught? What do you guys think? Can you teach good judgment? I hope so, otherwise I'm wasting a lot of people's time in here today. Yeah, good judgment can be taught. It's not easy. Sometimes it's difficult. If any of you guys have kids and teenagers like I do, it's almost impossible, right? But you try. So when we look at aeronautical decision making, our definition of it is a systematic approach to risk assessment and stress management. All right? What I'm really trying to say is aeronautical decision making is what you intend to do as a pilot, remote pilot or manned aircraft pilot, based on the latest information you have. Aeronautical decision making isn't something you do once before a flight. ADM is something that happens every second of planning, pre-flight, launch, mission, recovery, post-flight. You are using ADM skills throughout that entire cycle. Therefore, I can't overstate how important this stuff is. Manned aircraft pilots have been doing ADM and risk management their entire flying careers. We have over 100 years of manned aircraft aviation in the United States. ADM and risk management has been going through different genesis all throughout the course of manned aircraft history. UAS, a lot of this stuff is brand new. So there's a little bit of catch-up that we're trying to do. So we have to understand this stuff, because despite everything we do to make aviation safer, we build better motors, better bearings, better batteries, better software. We put all the stuff. Something happens, we change it. We redesign the vehicle itself. Still, over 80% of all aviation accidents, and you guys are now going to be included in this number, are human factors. Your UAS software may be on version 3.2.1, but this human brain, we're still on version 1.0. And there are no updates coming for our brain. We're still stuck with the same brain. So while we make the equipment better, our brain doesn't get better. We have to learn. We have to try to reformulate our own version of our own software. Nobody's going to download it for us. So what is our goal? To help you guys improve your ADM skills. We want to do mitigation of risk, analyze risk, everything associated with flight. That's our goal here today. I want you guys to be able to walk out of here and view your UAS flights differently. Right? So when we talk ADM, there's two elements, ADM, hazard, risk. The hazard is the real or perceived condition that you encounter. So looking at this photo up here right now, what would be a hazard? Wires. What's another hazard? Collision with the kid, right? Those are real conditions. Those are real hazard. No risk. Risk is the assessment of that hazard or cumulative hazards facing a pilot, right? So, is this flight risky? Some nodding yes, some just kind of staring at me, and some shaking their head no maybe. It's risky. It depends on what level of risk you think it is, right? Everybody's looking at this picture saying, yeah, there's risk, but it's not that risky. And maybe somebody else is going, I would never fly that. Not under those power lines with the kid on the skateboard. No way. Too risky. That's ADM. That's our risk analysis. Because when I asked that question, nobody said the exact same answer. And you shouldn't. Because we do it differently. We analyze our risk differently. We see things differently. Our experiences will lead us to different conclusions. Somebody that's got 4,000 missions flown with the UAS is going to see risk differently than somebody that's got 4. Fair statement? Your experiences will help determine what level of risk you want to take. So, some steps for good aeronautical decision making. First one, identify personal attitudes hazardous to a safe flight. The FAA has a list of attitudes. So what is it? Well, it's our predisposition to respond to people. You wake up with a bad attitude, or hey, you've got a good attitude today. Hazardous attitudes can change your judgment and can affect your flight and increase your risk unnecessarily. And we don't want that. What's a hazardous attitude? Well, there's a list. Anti-authority, impulsivity, invulnerability, macho, resignation. That's the FAA's big list. Now, I'll tell you, I've just about 7,000 hours of flying. I hold an ATP. I flew airlines. I flew general aviation. I flight instructed. I consider myself a fairly experienced pilot, manned aircraft. I consider myself safe, competent, but I've displayed every one of these at some point in my career. I'm not immune to this. There's been a time in my career, over 7,000 hours, that I have had every one of these attitudes. You can't help it. The key is recognizing it. So anti-authority, most people don't like other people telling them what to do. That's just it's kind of a natural thing, regardless of rules. The solution to this is to follow the rules. They're there for a reason. Follow the procedures of your employer or your own procedures of your self-employment. And if something doesn't work right, question the error. It's okay to question the error. Questioning the error is not anti-authority. Questioning it is understanding. Impulsivity. We got to do something now. It has to happen now. Something's going on. I don't have time to think. I'm going to do it. The reality is, most of the time, you have time. Very little in aviation needs to happen right now. Could be some emergencies where that's reality, but the truth is, you have time. Look at your alternatives. Make your decision based on the events that you're seeing right now. Take your time and make a good decision. Impulsive decisions are rarely good. Some people think that it'll never happen to them, right? Superman. I'll never crash my UAS. I'm never going into that power line. I'll never hit the kid. I can fly over people because I'm not going to lose control of my UAS. I've got a retractable gear airplane. I'll never land with the gear up, right? There are those that have, and there are those that will. That's the solution you want to think of in your head. I'm not going to lose control of my, well, people have lost control of their UAS. I don't want to be that one, so what do I need to do to change that? How about macho, right? Always trying to prove you can do it. I can do that mission, no problem. It's a little bit windy today, but I can handle that. The winds are gusting to 30 knots. Normally I don't fly that, but there's so many people watching, I got to do this. Right? That macho attitude. Remember, you have nothing to prove to anyone in aviation. The only thing you might prove by flying when you shouldn't is that you flew when you shouldn't have. And that's what people will remember. So why risk it? Why risk the career? How about resignation? Like, well, what am I going to do? I got to do it. I got to fly. Now, listen, you guys are remote pilots. You'll be remote pilots in command under Part 107. We define that. You're the captain of that ship. Granted, if you crash your UAS, you don't technically go down with the ship, but you're still the captain. You still be out a lot of money. Some of those UAS, if you go over to that drone tent over there, they're not cheap. They're not cheap. How many can you lose before it starts to run your business into the ground, right? So you never give up. You never give up. If you start to lose control of the UAS, don't just be like, well, I wonder where it's going to go. Never give up. Fly it. Get it safe. Don't quit until everything is done. This is a tough one. Modify your behavior. Right? Very, very difficult. How many people are married in here? How easy is it to change your spouse's behavior? Right? I still can't remember to put the toilet seat down. Whatever. Okay? It's tough to change that. So out of all the things we do, this might be the most difficult. In order to change our behavior, first you have to recognize it. It's much easier to recognize it yourself than to have your spouse or somebody else tell you, dude, you do this all the time. If somebody does tell you that, pause, listen, understand, and accept. Track your behavior. Say, okay, so let's say you have a particular behavior identified. Put that little nugget in your brain. Next time it happens, track it and try to figure out why. What triggered that behavior? If there's a trigger that makes that behavior happen, you need to remove the trigger and then stick with your program. There's 5 bullet points up here. Every one of those steps is very, very difficult. It's tough to change our behavior, but it's critical if we're not doing things the right way. Stress. We all have it. We have to cope with it. We wake up in the morning, or it's the weekend, or we didn't get a good night's sleep. 2 types of stress we want to be aware of, acute and chronic. Acute is the short term. It's the fight or flight response. Something happens, you're flying your UAS, and one of the props flies off. That's going to add some acute stress to you right there. The dangerous one is chronic. That's the insidious one. It creeps into your life. You don't realize it. And slowly, over time, without you realizing it, it can break your barrier of being able to cope. And that's when things go really south. It could be a sick relative, sick parent, where it's just over time that it's just creeping in there. It is the most damaging, not only to decision making, but your own health. Chronic stress is a terrible thing. So what can we do? Take care of yourself. Eat healthy. Get adequate sleep. If you're going to have a big mission tomorrow and it's important, that's not the night to stay up to 11 o'clock watching Game of Thrones. Go to bed, DVR it, watch it the next day. Get some sleep, get some rest. Talk to others, your friends, your family, maybe a professional. Try to eliminate that chronic stress. Drugs or alcohol do you no favors when it comes to stress. None. And if it's that bad, take a break. If you flew 20 missions this week for 10 different companies, and it's Friday, and somebody just called you up and wants you to fly another mission tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., maybe that's not the time to take another mission. Maybe the 21st mission that week isn't what you want to do. You're exhausted. Take a break. Let that business either go an extra day before you get it done, or maybe be willing to risk losing that business to save your own. We are developing risk assessment skills today. We're going to do that towards the end of the presentation. It's important that you don't just listen to me. I'm not the expert on everything. Listen to others. Find other sources of information that work for you. And then when it's all over, do a self-evaluation. Did it work? What do I need to change? What's good and what's bad? So now that we've got our good ADM skills, let's take a look at how we manage risk. During flight, you're going to make a lot of decisions under hazardous conditions. I don't think there's any flight, any mission you will do that doesn't have hazards associated with it. So the decisions you're making while flying are done under hazardous conditions. To do it safely, you need to assess the degree of risk and determine the best course of action to mitigate that. So 2 important words in that last paragraph: assess, mitigate. By the way, that's what we ask you to do when you submit a waiver request. Identify your hazards, assess the risk, and tell us how you're going to mitigate it. I'm going to fly safe. This doesn't meet any of that. We expect you to fly safe. Assess and mitigate. So our goal is to proactively do that. We don't want to be surprised by anything when we fly. When you launch on a mission, you don't want a surprise. You don't want to be like, oh, I didn't know that power line was there. Or holy smokes, they just let all the kids out for recess. I didn't know that was coming. We don't want surprises when we fly. Flying should be boring. It should be fun, but you don't want it to be exciting necessarily, right? So we proactively identify these hazards and mitigate those risks. So it's not as easy as it sounds, especially for remote pilots. Airline life. When I flew for the airline, I had support people all over the place. I never had to make a decision on an island. I had a first officer with me. I had dispatch. I had chief pilots I can get on the radio. I had other pilots on frequency I could talk to. My guess is that when you guys go fly a mission, it's just you. Most often. It's just you. So you're the one. Single pilot. It's just you. You're your own quality control. You make the decisions on an island. Generally speaking, when you're in the field and you're flying or getting ready to fly a mission, you can't pick up the phone and call a dispatcher and say, hey, what do you think? I got this load today. I'm flying. The winds are like this. You can't turn and ask your co-pilot, do you think this is a good idea? It's all up to you as a remote pilot. So a bit of a unique circumstance for you guys. Because we are goal-oriented, all pilots are goal-oriented, we tend to deny our own limitations. I can make it happen. That's a little bit of that macho-ness, right? I can make it happen. I can fly. This isn't going to be a problem. We need to understand what our limitations are. If you don't have a process or procedure for how you're going to successfully fly a mission, you need to come up with one, and you need to stick to that. Modify it over time as your experience changes, but have something that you follow. There are dozens of risk assessment tools online. Dozens. This one may not work for you. This one's pretty basic. It simply compares the likelihood against the severity. But this is how simple it can be. So the likelihood in this particular risk assessment matrix is you have the probability of its occurrence. Probable, occasional, it's remotely going to happen, or it's really improbable if that's ever going to happen. You compare that with the severity of, if it did happen, then it would be catastrophic, critical, marginal, negligible. So you pull up the graph and you say, I've got the power lines up there. If I hit them, it could be bad, but with the winds today, it gives me an occasional chance of hitting it with marginal safety. It puts me in the green area, medium risk. Again, this is just one of many risk assessment tools available to you, free online. Google it. Find one that works for you, but find one. Don't just think of it in your head like, I'm good. No, go through a process. It doesn't, that took what, 10 seconds to go through? It doesn't take very long to go through a process. So this is another example of a risk management process. This is something that we should be doing almost unconsciously every time we go up and fly. There are 4 fundamental principles to this. We never accept unnecessary risk. We make the decisions at the appropriate level. We accept risk only if the benefits outweigh the danger. And risk is the management of it integrated at all levels. So what do I mean? Accept no unnecessary risk. Once you launch your vehicle into the air, it's risky, right? You add risk the minute you start flying your drone. The safest place for your drone is where? In the case. That doesn't make any money, and it's not realistic to leave it in there all the time, so you take it out of the case and you fly it. So flying is not possible without risk. The unnecessary risk part comes without a corresponding return. I'm going to go fly, but I'm flying because I'm doing this, this, and this, or I'm doing a search and rescue mission, or I'm helping out, or I'm doing real estate. There's a corresponding return. When I talk about making decisions at the appropriate level, that's you. And the unmanned aircraft system world, that's you. You make the decisions. Don't let anybody make the decisions for you. If you work for a company, they're like, we need you to go out and fly today. And you're like, the winds are gusting to like 25. We need this done today, so go fly. Okay? Don't let them make the decision for you, because you are the captain. You are the remote pilot in command. And if something happens, the FAA is not going to come kicking in the door of the company and say, why'd you make him do that? They're going to come over to you and say, Captain, why did you go? Why did you accept that flight? You knew it was dangerous, and you did it anyway? So make those decisions at the appropriate level. Accept that risk when the benefits outweigh the dangers. It's always necessary to accept some risk when we fly. But you want to ask yourself, what is the return on your flight investment going to be? If you do not have a very good return on your flight investment, maybe that's an unnecessary flight and unnecessary risk. Make sure that your company, whether it's yourself or you actually work for a larger organization, make sure that the risk management is incorporated at every level. Whether it's the person initiating the flight, supplying the equipment, working on the equipment, risk management should be part of everything you do. Risk management isn't something you do once, it's who you are. Just like ADM. ADM isn't something you do just prior to the flight, it's who you are. It's what you do for the whole mission. Right? The margin in aviation, the error, that marginal error is thin. Right? And the cost of our errors can be really, really high. Some of the UAS cost $15,000 now, some of the high quality ones, bigger, larger ones that can haul. That's a lot of money to lose if you had a catastrophic failure. So we don't want to have bad decision making. We don't want to have unnecessary risk, because depending on what models you buy, it doesn't take too many of these to end your career, to end the company. And we want to avoid that. You guys ready for some real world scenarios? I'm going to want your opinion. I'm going to ask that you guys talk. Now, if you have a question, make sure we've got the guys with the mics coming around. But I'm going to go through 4 real world scenarios, and we can have a little bit of discussion, and then we'll have question times left at the end. So here's scenario 1. It's your first job, right? Large organization. This is an exciting time for you. This project needs to be done now, right? Based on how well you do this job for this large organization, you could have future contracts. So you arrive on site. It's about a 3-hour drive. Weather is great, perfect for flying, all within Part 107 requirements. You need to film this new facility they're putting up there. You're excited to go. The sun is just right. The lighting is just right. And then during pre-flight, you notice a nick. And you're like, well, I'll grab my spares. And you go to the truck, and they're not there. I forgot my spares at home. So you take a look at that nick, and you're like, you know what? I've flown with a nick in my prop blade before. But this one's like a little bit deeper. Just a little bit deeper. What do? Let's apply some ADM. Let's apply some risk management. You're out there on site. This is your big one. It's your first job. You probably get some future contracts. Yeah, it's a nick. Are we going?
No go.
No go. What do you, sir? So he's going to break out the sandpaper, file down the nick, test flight in a safe area, then make his decision. I know, sir, you had a... No spare props with you. Yeah. Well, and I do this, and everybody's like, I always bring spare props. Sure, we all do. They're always there, right? But it doesn't work for my example. So you got to bear with me a little bit. All right, so no, yes, I'm going to file it and test fly it. What else? Who would fly with it as is? There is no right or wrong answer to this, because risk is your decision, not mine. Yes, sir. Analyze the risk of what you're flying over. So if I back up, that's what you're flying over. It's nobody's there on the job site yet. File it down and fly it. Okay? So here we go. what are the hazards, right? The hazard is the nick in the propeller blade, which some of us are going to mitigate by filing it down. There's the hazard of the pressure to complete the mission, right? Your first big job. You just spent $12,000 on camera and equipment to fly, and now you can do it. So this is exciting. A lot of pressure to complete that. There could be regulatory noncompliance. You are required to ensure that your vehicle is safe for flight by Rule 107.15. So what are the risks? You could lose control. You could lose the revenue if you say, you know what, I'm all the way out here and I don't have any spares, and they scream at you, how could you do that? You're the worst pilot ever. I'm sorry, I can't go. You might lose the job. You might lose future revenue. The loss of equipment. If it crashes, maybe we sanded it down and it flew once just fine, but we fly it again and the fatigue gives way and it goes down. You could end up on the bad side of an FAA investigation. Yes, sir.
I'd also consider what the mission is. Like if someone needs the photographs for a real estate listing that's going to go live the next day, I'd say no way. But consider if EMS requested me to help look for, say, a lost kid in the building complex, and we got to find him before sundown, then
Great.
Then now you have a
So
counteracting.
his point is it depends on the mission. If it's for a photo op, maybe you delay it. If it's for a kid that got into that complex and nobody can find him, they think he might be on the roof, maybe you accept that risk and go. That's a great point. Let's go to another scenario. Here we go. There's a protest happening right now in the city, and you've been contacted by your local news organization. They know you fly. They know you get great shots. They want some overhead footage of this protest happening right now in the city. The cops are there. Everybody's showing up. So you realize, I don't have a waiver for operating over people. Okay, that could be a problem. So you check the location against the terminal area chart, and man, it's right there. This is what class airspace would this be? Delta, right? And it's right there on the line. Is that line in? Is it out? Is that in Delta? Do I need an other? You know what? During this analysis, you get 2 more phone calls. This time from major news media outlets willing to pay you big bucks to go do this mission. Oh, the pressure is mounting, right? You say, oh, now I went from a $800 shoot to a $10,000 live video feed. We want it now. Well, that's a lot of money. I'm going to submit my airspace authorization, even though I don't know if I'm in or not, but I haven't received a response yet either way because that darn FAA, their online portal is terrible. It takes forever. What do we do? Are we flying? You guys are the pilots. This is real time. You guys are out there. Real work. Here comes a microphone for you over here, sir.
Explain to the news agencies the rules and see if they'll accept from a different angle as opposed to right over the top of people.
Okay. Yep. Say, maybe I can do this, but I got to fly it. And they say, no. We can get angles like that. We've got tower cams. We want you to go right over the top. We want to get that really cool, smooth UAS shot over the top. So I don't want to hear about rules. Can you do it? Are you going to do this for me? Call a chopper pilot. So you're essentially saying, find somebody else to fly.
I actually work for the media, and we fly drones. We have about 24 RPICs and 25 UASs. And I would say, on behalf of our company in that situation, we would decide not to fly. We would probably maybe look into a helicopter pilot or manned pilot in that regard in this situation.
Right. Because the risk would be too great. Correct. Right? The risk would be too great. So what are our hazards? Operating over people without a waiver. Perhaps if you really went up there and flew the mission they wanted you. Maybe operating in Class D. Tough to tell, right? Could be one or the other. Possibly regulatory noncompliance. Those are all hazards. The risk, the crowds are unpredictable. So they start riding instead of protesting, and they see this thing flying overhead up there, and they've got a bottle in their hand. What do you think they're going to do? I'm going to nail this thing, right? It's also high visibility. Because there'll probably a lot of other media outlets stuck on the ground filming this, and they're going to see that and be like, man, I wish I'd get that shot. And all of a sudden they look at it, it starts to go down. What are they going to do? Oh, watch this. You may not want that visibility. You may not want that media attention, right? Again, you could lose some contracts. If you say no, go find a chopper pilot, they may never call you again. These are real risks you take, and you have to analyze them and mitigate them and decide what's going to be best for you. 2 more scenarios, and I'm going to open up the question. This one is being hired by a marketing firm. They want you to do some aerial photographs of city parks. Right? So you pull up the sectional chart, you look at this, you're like, oh, that's going to be Class G up to 1,200 feet AGL. Looks good. I can operate over there. I carefully pick my park. There it is. I'm flying. Everything looks good. I'm up there taking video. And he shows up. And he says, hey, you can't fly that drone over city property. We have local city ordinances that control our airspace. You need to get that thing on the ground now. You're violating our city airspace ordinance. I saw some people smile right away. What's the first thing you think of when you hear cities trying to regulate airspace? Can they do that? No, they can't do that, right? So this police officer is wrong, right? I can fly over the city. I'm in FAA's jurisdiction. Your city ordinance doesn't preempt or take over federal law. What do? You're flying. It's up there. You're taking the video you need. And he's standing right here like this. I want you to land. What do? You know he's wrong, right? You know you're in the right. I don't have a lot of answers coming in. Oh, up here.
Look, it's only stock footage. You don't need it at the moment right now. I'd comply with the officer's instructions and then take it up with the city attorney.
Okay? He's saying comply. Right? Take it up with the city attorney. How many, just from a show of hands, how many people would say, I'll deal with you in a minute, officer. I'm finishing my flight. Just wait. Okay? There's a few, right? How many would say, okay, and land the UAS? All right, most of you saying, I promise you there was never any right answers, but this one I'm going to say that there is. Land. If the officer comes up and says, you're doing this, this, and this, even if you know he's wrong, land. Why? Because it's a distraction. At the very least, you trying to complete your mission with him standing there angry at you is a distraction. And you don't want to add that risk. That's an unnecessary risk. We don't want that. Furthermore, we don't want confrontation with law enforcement. You know you're right. He thinks he's right. Who's going to win that battle? Him, right? So if you just say, yeah, hold on, Joe, Friday, let me finish up. And then you land, and he's like, good, stay here, go against my squad car. He grabs your UAS, puts it in the back of the trunk. Whoa. That's a reality that could happen. He's wrong. You're eventually going to get it back, but it may not be easy. So land. If the police officer asks you to stop doing something, stop. Stop. Be a good ambassador. Explain to him why you can and can't. Maybe, like you said, it's a stock footage thing. It's not critical I get it done today, but now here's my opportunity to educate this small town on what we can do with UAS. When a police officer's there, that's not the time to stand your ground. Just follow his instructions, please. All right, scenario 4, air show. All right? You've been asked by an air show to, before it starts, so no TFR is in effect, to go out and fly down to get some crowd footage. So that red box up there is the crowd area. They're limited to staying in there. They can't get past it. There's barriers. They have security people. Nobody's going to walk out here. So you pick your starting point right here, the green X, and you're going to go up that way, down that way, and back the same direction. You're not going to be flying over people because you're outside of the crowd line. You have all the requisite authorizations and permissions you need. Do we go? You've got all the permissions you need. You've guaranteed nobody's going to be underneath your UAS because they're physically restricted by barriers and crowd control. You're going up to 100 feet. 100 feet. Yeah, you've got it pre-programmed into your iPad. This actually happened. I stood there and I watched and I talked to the guy. So he's got it programmed in. It's a GPS, and it flew his track all the way down back. They hover, then they go up, and then it flew. The camera aimed and filmed the crowd. Do you go? Do you fly this? Yeah, in the blue. Airspace is clear. How many, for show of hands, how many people would fly this mission as designed? How many people would not? Okay, for the no's, why wouldn't you? Because you think it's the right answer. There's too many FAA shirts around here. I'm not going to fly at all. Okay. What's that? Okay, so you're saying you don't like the 100-foot altitude because it could drift down, or the close proximity? Okay, maybe change altitude here.
I mean, on a good day, the UAS will probably perform good, but you have to be thinking about what if we have a runaway, et cetera, and it goes towards the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So there'd be heavy pre-flight, risk mitigation, plans,
Yep.
et cetera, that kind of thing.
So here's what I talked with the individual. He was properly licensed. The drone was registered. He had all the authorizations he needed. It was all good to go. And I asked him, when it gets here, at the very end of that long green triangle, and you have a problem with the UAS, what are you going to do? He says, I push return to home. I said, what is it going to do? He says, it comes straight to me. I'm like, okay, so it's going to go straight to you, right through the crowd. Now you've got a UAS with a problem that you're flying right over the top of people. That's not a good idea, right? So what we ended up doing is moving our X up here to the corner and ran it straight down and straight back. It was totally fine. I was an FAA guy, stood there right with him. I sort of helped him with his decision making by asking questions, and we flew it. He flew it and it worked great. That's the type of stuff that I want you guys to take away from this. Because most people look at it and go, yeah, it's going to go down, back, down, back. But what you want to do is go ADM, aeronautical decision making, risk management. What are the hazards? What is the hazard when it gets right there? What could happen? And mitigate that risk. I don't want it coming over the crowd of people when it has a problem, right? So the hazards were loss of control, the return to home issue, people potentially being involved with this. Could injure somebody. At the very least, you're going to end up with some bad publicity if it does happen because it's an air show. There's lots of people with everybody's got a video camera now, right? Out it comes. Watch it crash into the people. Post it on Facebook and YouTube instantly. We don't want that attention. So when you do a mission, look at the risk. Identify your hazards. Assess it. Mitigate those hazards, the risks they create. Use ADM throughout your flight. Now, I didn't make any of this stuff up. We actually published a lot of free reference materials for you guys. Everything that I put into this presentation came out of 2 free PDF online FAA handbooks. One is the Risk Management Handbook, and the other one's called the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, PHAK, or sometimes people call it the PHAK. Chapter 2 of the PHAK is Aeronautical Decision Making. They explained it in there far more eloquently with prettier pictures than I did up here. So if you want more information on it, check with those 2 books. That's a great place to start because it's free. Hey, we're all pilots, therefore you guys are all cheap because you're pilots now, and we like free stuff. So free books right there. Now I think I have about 15 minutes for questions. Again, we've got a couple of mics floating around. If you have a question, raise your hand. Let the microphone get to you so our recording people can hear it when we broadcast it later. Any questions you guys have? I must have done. Oh, okay, there, fine. A couple.
You talked about the authorization to fly at night, and you told us what wasn't a good answer.
That's a waiver
but
to
you
fly at
didn't
night.
give us any examples of what would be the right answer.
Okay, so waiver to fly at night, not an authorization, right? So in order to fly at night, you need a waiver because the rule states you can't. So you want a waiver from that rule. That goes back to we tend to interchange those terms a lot. What we ask you to do for submitting a waiver, and I can't stand up here and say, put this, 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 and this, and this, it'll get approved. Because I will have people on the other side of this wall probably come over here and murder me for doing that, because that's not how it works. Everybody's a little bit different. Are you familiar with our performance-based standards with waivers? Okay. Go to our web portal. At the top, it's going to have performance-based standard. Every rule, for example, this time daylight, is going to have a list of performance-based standards we want you to identify. How are you going to ensure that the device is lighted and can be seen for at least 3 miles? How are you going to do this, that? At the very minimum, you need to answer the performance-based standard items, and they're very clearly laid out. What we want to see is you tell us what all the hazards are associated with flying at night, what your assessment of the risk of that is going to be, and how you will mitigate each one. So hazard, assess, and mitigate. That's what we need to see in the waiver. And it's a little bit goofy because it's a box this big on our portal. You need to type a lot of information in there. So, I know, you're shaking your head. I know. Because I don't know the answer. Because I don't know what you're flying, where you're flying, and how you intend to fly it. So I can't tell you what the answer is for you because I don't know those things. But I do know that we want to see from you is you identify the hazards associated with your UAS on your mission, how you analyze that hazard and what type of risk it poses, and then how you are going to mitigate the risk based on the tools you have. Aren't you guys all glad to be inside right now? It just started raining, right? Another question here.
Yeah, last year the FAA rolled out the new compliance philosophy that was for like general aviation. So like if you make an honest mistake, they weren't just going to try and ding you. They were going to, you know, does that goodwill, I guess, extend also to UAS operators now?
Absolutely. The compliance philosophy we started in 2015 in October. It applies to all airmen. Raise your hand if you're a remote pilot. Keep your hand up if you're an airman. No hands should ever go down, right? You guys are airmen. So yes, the compliance philosophy, it works. It's been working for almost 2 years now. And in Minnesota, where I'm from, there's been a lot of positive feedback. Like people are like, really, this is how the FAA is going to work now? This is great. This is the way you guys should be doing it forever. So yes, compliance philosophy works for all pilots, remote pilots or manned aircraft pilots. Other questions? Okay, guys, if you, do we have one more? Okay.
I think this is hopefully a quick one. The low altitude authorization and notification capability.
Lance.
Lance. Yeah. Okay, I wasn't sure how to pronounce it. Is that going to be that? You said there's going to be an app for that. Is that going to kind of replace the before you fly thing?
So will Lance replace before you fly? No. And I'm not sure if it's going to come out as an app or a mobile platform in terms of how Lance will look. But before you fly and Lance are two very different. Before you fly is very much developed for the hobby recreational operator. And if you use it under Part 107, you'll see that right away. It's going to show airports and things that you're like, what? I don't need permission here. The Lance portion is going to be the airspace authorization tool. That will come online this fall. And I'm not sure if it'll be an app, but it won't replace before you fly. Okay, I tell you what, since it's getting raining pretty loud, it's hard to hear. I'm going to stick around a little bit. I'll answer questions afterwards. I'll be just right up here in the corner. I want to thank everybody for showing up. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Fly safe. We'll see you again soon. Enjoy Oshkosh.